So with that, we'll begin. I want to begin by introducing myself and my colleague, Nick Stamos. I'm Bill Fletcher. I run the business development team here at eShare, and among other things, manage our partnerships. I do want to thank our partners who helped bring all of us together this afternoon: Carasoft, NovaCoast, TC Engine, and IntelliPeak. So thank you to our partners for helping us put this session together. And with that, I'll introduce Nick Stamos.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Stamos. I'm the co-founder and CEO of eShare. It's a pleasure to be with you today. eShare really is the vision that I had sort of post the Digital Guardian experience, which sort of was the first player in the DLP space, and eShare sort of is the sort of a continuation platform focused on external sharing and collaboration. So thank you, everybody, today.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. The agenda that we'll be walking through this afternoon is, if I can advance that slide appropriately, is what you see here. I'll talk a little bit about what we think the opportunity is for leveraging M365 to support external sharing needs that your organization may have. In the process of doing so, describe the eShare solution and the business use cases that are predominantly satisfied. If we're not running too late in time, I'll also describe the integration that we have with Microsoft Information Protection, specifically around sensitivity levels. And before segueing to a demonstration, I'll summarize what are the advantages of eShare, why introduce this into your environment, both as an alternative to point solutions that you may be running today, but also as a complement to M365. And as indicated before, hopefully we'll leave enough time for us to do some little bit of Q&A. So the opportunity arises through many organizations having deployed M365 with an emphasis on supporting their internal collaborations, their mail activities, team collaboration through the Microsoft Teams products. And it was certainly not lost on us that represented not only an opportunity to add value, but specifically to help organizations extend that platform to include their file sharing and collaborations with external parties, which I suspect most of you on this call understand to be a very interesting and challenging problem. And in doing so, streamline the communications and collaborations that are underway with your clients, your internal users, your suppliers, partners, all manner of outside party. And of course, anytime you've got any information exchange externally, you've got the need to protect that information. So it's building upon the good work that Microsoft has done around MIP, specifically sensitivity labels, and helping to actuate those data protection capabilities of Microsoft. And for many of our clients, it's not just the ad hoc sharing initiated by users, but it's also workflows that involve files that may be initiated by or consumed by enterprise applications. So that's another aspect to what we do. And in the end, it's helping organizations extract more value from the investment you've made in your deployments of M365. And for most organizations, external file sharing is nothing new since the advent of computers and electronic files. There has been the need to share those files with outside parties. And organizations have assembled a number of tools to help them with that. Rights management solutions, secure mail, file sharing software, products like Box and Dropbox, and more automated file transfer solutions in the form of SFTP. But these tools have their challenges. They're really not file sharing tools. They're really file transfer tools. So you're giving the data away in all cases. So certainly the security around those shared files is, for all intents and purposes, non-existent. The modern collaboration capabilities that M365 makes available in the form of online redlining and co-authoring of documents, none of that is possible if you just simply attach a file to an email and send it off to the recipient, right? That opportunity is lost. And because of that, especially when you are collaborating on documents, you get confusion around which version of the file, you've got an exchange of files, the need to merge documents. It's certainly a mess for many users. And then, of course, there's duplicate costs because you've assembled all these solutions, but you've put Office 365 or M365 in place. So for many of you, you're thinking, well, I've deployed M365, I must be okay, right? Well, M365 brings both with it some opportunity and challenges with respect to external file sharing. Much of that arises around enabling external file sharing through OneDrive and SharePoint, or enabling guest access to Teams. And for a host of reasons, organizations have put the brakes on those activities. Either the security controls are considered insufficient, the native encryption capabilities of Microsoft brings with it some friction that many recipient organizations can't satisfy. And as with any file sharing with a Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, or SharePoint, there are also phishing concerns, and that leads to link blocking on the part of recipients. So those who have deployed M365, they're almost there. With the introduction of eShare and our secure data collaboration platform, we help organizations realize the full potential of M365 in satisfying their external file sharing use cases. And the combination allows internal users to use their familiar productivity components of M365, mostly in the form of the Office products, Outlook, Teams, certainly so, but also just a good old-fashioned web browser and a web portal for initiating external file sharing with external parties, using in all cases, and this is unique to the architecture of eShare, using your existing cloud file storage for all storage. So yes, we are in the file sharing and collaboration business, but we're not bringing any storage to the table. We're instead leveraging the investment that you've already made. For the external party, there's the opportunity to brand the entire experience per the needs of your organization, so that the trust relationship exists between your organization and your client, your supplier, your partner. And if eShare has done its job right, disintermediate not only eShare from the equation, but disintermediate Microsoft and Box and Dropbox, whatever cloud file storage that you may be using. And in the process, embrace this link-based approach to file sharing that unlocks the modern collaboration capabilities of M365. The use cases are many, and I'll be using in the demo today a couple of these. One is for manufacturing companies, the ability to engage external parties to accelerate time to market, especially getting product information in the hands of a supply chain. It's allowing your salespeople to correspond with clients in a very productive way. I'll be highlighting in the demo this afternoon customer support and how Teams can be used to facilitate an interaction between your support teams and clients. And then there's the strategic partnerships where virtual data rooms become a very productive way of exchanging sensitive information. A use case that we're very proud of at the outset of COVID, one of our clients, Takeda, started up a COVID plasma alliance with firms that would otherwise be their competitors, and wanted to stand up a branded virtual data room, branded per the needs of the COVID-19 Blood Plasma Alliance, but leverage Takeda's infrastructure in doing so and providing Takeda staff the advantage of being able to interact natively through SharePoint and Teams, their native tools, when sharing files with external parties. And eShare realized this and made this possible, all within a very short period of time, literally hours, to take this and stand it up. What was beneficial to the external party was no provisioning of accounts. Takeda didn't need to set anything up to support this use case. So it was just a very clean way of leveraging SharePoint and Teams to erect these virtual data rooms, these branded virtual data rooms. The integration with Microsoft, specifically sensitivity labels, becomes important as a way to transcend the traditional approaches to sharing files and DLP. And really the existing way is just to transfer files, right? There really is no file sharing. You're giving that file away. And you're making a decision at the point in time that you share the file, whether this is appropriate or not, with allow block being the only options available to you from a DLP standpoint. But with the introduction of eShare and the use of links to share files, it opens up the possibility of having a very robust set of rights to those shared files, so that the needs of security and the needs of the business are being balanced in a way that these allow block approaches would not allow for, and to leverage understanding of the content in the form of an MIP sensitivity label to determine what's appropriate and what's not. And the way this would happen in practice is user initiates a sharing of file that may be labeled. eShare, as you'll see when I get into the demo, is used to share that file and to use the label to determine what rights are appropriate, and also to use the label perhaps to determine what authentication is appropriate. You know, perhaps with a restricted document, you may want a second factor of authentication that may not otherwise be required with public domain information. So it's using this understanding of the content to make very intelligent decisions about what can be shared with whom and what rights the recipient should have. So you may be wondering why eShare, right? Especially given many of your organizations have made a commitment to M365. What is eShare bringing to the table? Well, first is an opportunity to leverage all of those existing productivity tools for the file sharing and how your users can initiate that. So whether it's through OneDrive and SharePoint, we also, by the way, support Box, Dropbox, and Google Drive, whether it's through Teams, whether it's through the Outlook in the form of an email attachment, or even from the Office applications themselves, right? At the time that you're creating content, the ability to share that content with external parties rather than close down those applications, go into some file system and initiate your file sharing from there. So the whole point here is to streamline your collaboration and to use the native applications. Another aspect to eShare is the role that email plays in initiating collaboration, and not as just a simple file attachment. So in this example here, a customer service rep decides, hey, I need to share this file with an outside party, but I'm going to request that some files be made available to me in return. So I initiate that request. I select an eShare sharing policy, and I'll show you in a demo how this is done. Or perhaps an MIP sensitivity label is being used to automatically trigger this. eShare performs 3 actions on this email. We're going to replace the attachment with a link. We're going to store that attachment in the cloud file storage of your choice, OneDrive and SharePoint being a good example. And then we're going to send the email off to the recipient. The recipient gets what looks to be a normal email, only the attachment is replaced with a link. And perhaps the email itself says, hey, Mr. Recipient, please review this document and send me something in return. Maybe it's a request for documentation or some supporting information. When the recipient accesses what we call a trusted share, not only will they see the attachments that have been made available to them, but they'll be given an opportunity to perform an upload, fulfilling the request that's been made of them. The other is the ability to apply a least privilege approach to how you share information. And this is by having a robust set of rights. Maybe it's view only in the presence of a given sensitivity label. Maybe it's also stepping up the authentication requirements of the recipient in a very flexible way. And this is an area where we've invested a lot, and that is allowing recipients to authenticate using credentials that they may already have in the form of OpenID, eliminating the need for them to set up and perhaps forget yet another password. But it's also leveraging partnerships. ExoStar is one that we're newly working with, that the Defense Industrial Base is very familiar with, but also supporting any custom integrations that our clients may want. In all cases, obviously, regulatory compliance is a requirement. So between the granular policies, the data always being in your cloud file storage unless you allow a download, and the ability to always track and provide robust reporting, which I'll show you in the demo as well, allows our clients to meet whatever regulatory requirements they may be subject to. And with respect to robust reporting, consistent with our kind of all-in approach around M365 is to leverage Microsoft's Power BI for all the reporting and analytics that our platform makes available. And then lastly, the ability to brand the entire experience per the needs of your organization so that your trust relationship is being built and your brand reputation is being built as you interact with outside parties. So with that, I'm going to segue to a demo. Again, I invite you to ask any questions that you may have, and Nick will field those. I'm going to stop my screen share now, move out of this PowerPoint, and segue to the demo. Okay. So what I'm going to begin with is, actually, I need to share out my screen. Thank you, Nick, for making that abundantly clear. Share out my desktop. There we go. Great. Thanks, Nick. So what I'm going to show in the demo is on the left-hand side of my screen will be the internal user for an organization called Bank to Trust, more specifically Don West. And on the right-hand side of my screen will be the recipient experience. So that's a good way to stay oriented as I go through the demonstration. And what you're seeing here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is actually eShare. This is the web portal into the eShare service implemented for Bank to Trust. A few things I'll observe or help you observe is one is the service runs on a subdomain of Bank to Trust, right? It doesn't say eShare. In this case, this organization is using OneDrive and SharePoint for their cloud file storage. So it doesn't say Microsoft, doesn't say OneDrive, doesn't say SharePoint, will never say Box or Dropbox. The entire service is white labeled, and this is all the way down to the URL used to share files. This is important to avoid the link blocking that would otherwise occur. Those of you who are in highly regulated business or government organizations understand that getting a Box link or Dropbox link into your organization or perhaps your peers is real challenging. This avoids all of that. The logos, the colors, I mean, every aspect of the system will be branded, and this will extend to the emails that you'll see in just a moment. Now, in this case here, this organization has connected SharePoint to the eShare service, but only select SharePoint sites, and Don is only able to see those sites that he's a member of. The organization has also connected Don's OneDrive to eShare as well. So this allows Don to share files from select SharePoint sites and from his OneDrive with external parties, right? So this is the solution that the organization has embraced for external file sharing. So Don could initiate what we call trusted sharing directly from here. The use case that I talked about earlier, the customer support use case, is one where perhaps Teams would be a better place to initiate file sharing. In fact, this is what we do here at eShare. Whenever we onboard a new client, we set up a team channel for that client. In this case here, you see I've got Acme Corp and Globex, some fictional organizations. Our practice here is to set up a folder called Shared with Customer. In this way, internally, everyone knows that this folder is being used to share files out to that client. But elsewhere within that channel, we're free to share files and collaborate internally here at eShare. So what a project manager may do is set up this Teams channel. And as most of you may know, underneath a Teams channel is a SharePoint site. And so this is the eShare service being presented through Teams. And I can see that I've got customer success being the team, and I can see the individual channels. And in this case here, if I go to shared documents, you'll see I've got a folder for each of these channels. And if I go into Acme Corp, I see I've got a folder called shared with customer. Now, the project manager may decide, hey, I want to share this out with those at Acme Corp. They're a new client, and I'm going to create this shared folder through which to share files with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this out to a couple of recipients. And in fact, both of these email addresses are mine. I'm going to input some nonsensical message just for brevity. And what you're seeing here are sharing policies defined by the organization that Don has available to him. Now, in this case here, I'm seeing only one policy being available, and that's by virtue of the fact that this Teams channel is carrying a confidential sensitivity label, right? And that's something that the organization has defined, and it creates essentially swim lanes, guardrails for Don to operate in whenever he's doing his external file sharing. And if the organization allows, Don can see what the options are, and additionally, perhaps tweak some of the settings for this trusted share. In this case here, for example, I can optionally allow the recipient, in this case here, these two bills, I can allow them to delete files that are in this trusted share. That's something the organization is giving me some flexibility with. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit share. So what's happening now is eShare is sending a notification off to these recipients saying this folder called Shared with Customer, and perhaps I should have renamed that to say Virtual Data Room for Bank to Trust and Acme Corp. But we're sending that notification off to the recipient. Now, in all cases, again, the files remain in OneDrive and SharePoint. So eShare is doing no copying of any kind. So what I'm going to do is look at that notification I was sent. Here it is now. So now I'm on the right-hand side of the screen, right? So now I'm Bill, recipient of this trusted share from Don. And I get this notification. Again, it's all branded. It comes from Don, no mention of eShare. And I'm going to go ahead and access this trusted share. Now, since I'm already authenticated within this browser session, seeing OpenID work its magic under the covers. eShare is doing a handshake, in this case here with Microsoft. And Microsoft knows that Bill is in fact Bill and is authenticated within this Chrome browser session. So I'm allowed to immediately have access to the file. Now, you see I've got two files within this folder. Both are carrying MIP sensitivity labels, one confidential, one restricted. Now, what's going to happen here is I can go ahead and access this file, this Word document, joint development agreement, directly. I can view, I can edit this file. However, when I go to access the ITAR parts document, some additional authentication is stepping in, right? Because it's labeled at a higher classification level, the eShare policy says, hey, not only do you need to authenticate using credentials that you already have, in this case here, Bill has with Microsoft, it's going to require Bill to input a one-time access code that's emailed to him. So I'm going to request that access code, right? So this gives you some control over the authentication requirements of the recipient, even though that recipient is authenticating to their existing ID provider. Again, in the case of Bill, that's Microsoft. So here's my one-time access code. I'll go ahead and input that. And what you're also going to see is part of this, stepped up authentication and controls is requiring me to click through a terms of use, right? So I have to accept these terms of use before I can access this restricted document, right? This wasn't present with the confidential document, but is present with the restricted document. So I can go ahead and confirm that, and now I'm able to view that file. On the right-hand side of the screen here, you see the original message, the nonsensical message that Don sent to Bill. Bill can reply to this. We do support @mention capability. Actually, in this case here, it originates from Don. So maybe I'm replying to Don saying, hey, Don, check out this file, right? And what I could do is either, go and if I had 100 files in this folder, it may be appropriate for me to make specific reference to one, and I can send that reply off to Don. So you can see we've got a messaging capability that is part of this virtual data room that can be optionally configured, that allows the two parties to chat with each other outside of email, which most all of us understand is inherently insecure. So this allows for a very private chat. All this goes into a SQLite database, so it could be made part of your e-discovery and other processes. Any change that's made within this virtual data room, the participants, especially the creator, Don West, is going to get notifications letting him know what has been occurring within that virtual data room. Now, you may recall earlier that I sent this to two bills, right? One of those bills had an email address. Excuse me, had a Gmail address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and access this, right? So now I'm bill@gmail.com. And I'm going to access that same trusted share. But and in this browser session, I was not previously authenticated. So now you're seeing the OpenID authentication occur. And I'm using my existing credentials to access this trusted share. But when I go to access this restricted document, the eShare policy says, well, this is not a corporate email address. This is a Gmail address, and you're accessing a restricted document. And I know that by virtue of the label on this document. And you need to give a business justification, right? Not any Gmail user can access the file. It's going to require the data owner's approval to access the file, right? So I need this to do what you asked. So this provides an opportunity to blend, allow, and deny lists, blend sensitivity labels, blend recipient domains in a way that provides your organization control. So imagine this was export regulated data that was being accessed with someone with a Gmail address, right? This may be appropriate to require the data owner's approval before you allow that recipient access to the file. And what's going to happen is a request is going to go out to Don that says, hey, temporary access is being requested by this individual, Bill Fletcher. Is that okay? So I can go ahead and approve the access to that file. That temporary override, which is configurable by your organization, is approved. And now when I go to access that restricted document, I'm able to view it. Although in this case here, again, I do have that stepped up authentication, which requires the one-time passcode. And that is off being sent to the recipient. And I'll be able to input that and access the file as the other bill was able to earlier. So right now I've been showing the creation of a trusted share through Teams using files that are stored in OneDrive and SharePoint. Something else that I may want to do as well is to initiate that file sharing through email, which we think is very powerful. Email is the collaboration tool of choice for most individuals. Organizations oftentimes puts the brakes on this because it results in data being given away. But imagine if you were able to take that attachment and turn it into a link and have rights associated with that file when the link is accessed. Well, that's in fact what eShare does. So I can create an email here. I'm going to create this to Bill again. I'm going to say this is an agreement, and I could type a message here that says, here's that agreement that we discussed. It's being made available for your online review and redlining. And go ahead and access that file, or should we access the attachment that I want to make available. And I can obviously select that from anywhere that the user can see. And here on the right-hand side, you're seeing an add-in that we make available to Outlook. And the add-in allows the sender to pick a sharing policy. Now, in this case here, I've got two that have been defined, just simply secure mail, which protects the entire email, or secure mail, which just protects only the attachment, turning it into a link. But you can imagine I've got other choices here that says contract negotiation, virtual data room, client communication, right? Whatever your organization defines. And then again, you would have options that the user could optionally see and make some changes to. In this case here, I'm just going to leave those defaults as they are. And I'm going to go ahead and send this document off to Bill. So what I've done is I've generated an email through eShare. I'm turning the attachment into a link. And that link is in effect creating a dynamic virtual data room, not just through which the attachment is being made available to Bill in this case, but it also allows Bill to not only reply using the secure conversations feature I showed earlier, but also would allow Bill to provide some documents in return, right? So perhaps Don's message was, hey, here's my agreement. Please review it and redline it. If you have any issues with it, perhaps you've got a document of your own you'd like me to use, in which case Bill would provide something in return to Don. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull up the right browser, and I'm going to look for that secure email that Don was sent. That Bill was sent. So here's that email. It says agreement. Here's that nonsensical message that I input, and here's the attachment. And you notice now the attachment is a link, but otherwise the email is as Don intended and as Bill would have expected. I'm going to access that link. Again, I'm already authenticated to this browser session, so I'm allowed to access the file directly. This is the same experience, same recipient experience. So whether the file sharing is done through a web browser, through Teams, an Outlook file attachment, whether it's done through Office Online, the recipient always has the same branded experience. Now, in this case here, I was being encouraged to review and edit this thing online. And we have full integration with Microsoft's Office Online products, in this case here for Word. So now I can redline this document directly within my web browser, and Don can access that same file. In fact, in this case, Don was sent a notification that says, hey, Bill has accessed your file. Do you want to access that same trusted share? Perhaps co-author the document along with Bill, in which case that's what I want to do. Let me size that a little bit. So I'm going to edit this in Word Online and turn on the review capability, and you'll see the full, co-authoring capability of Office Online being available to the two parties, right? So the two of them are within the same document. These are the native capabilities of Word Online. We've just made it possible to access this through eShare through our integration with Microsoft. And again, the two can converse with each other, again, outside of insecure email through this trusted share, and have an ongoing dialogue with each other. And not only the ability for Bill to access what originated as an attachment, Bill could also send something in return to Don. Perhaps he says, no, let's use this, and send that reply off to Don. So you can see what we've done is created a collaboration object in the form of a virtual data room merely by sending an email to an email recipient. I could have had multiple recipients in this virtual data room. It's not just limited to one. In fact, here at eShare, obviously we use our own product, and in support of the deployment of our products, we'll have many, many dozens of customers, participating in a review of a document or contributing to one of these virtual data rooms. So we've got 5 minutes to the end of the session. I do want to allow for some questions. Look to my colleague Nick and see if we can find a question or two that we can help answer. Certainly, this would be a good time to raise any questions that you'd like us to
We've got
address.
actually 4 open questions. If the attachment, we have 5, I already answered one. One question that I answered was from Matt Henson. Can terms of use be customized based on policy? Can terms of service be dynamic, inserting certain attributes characterized from a folder instead of country? So the answer is yes. You can have as many terms if you want. They can be customized by recipient domain or by policy or combination thereof. You can't have them be dynamically off the property essentially in the folder, but you can have as many as you want. And like I said, map them to a policy or policy/recipient domain accordingly. And all that's done on the server side, so the user doesn't get any of that complexity.
And I should add that these policies can be mapped to sensitivity labels. So you could, in the case of an ITAR sensitivity label, have a terms of use always displayed to recipients, specific to the standard of care that is expected in the presence of that content. I'll also add that you can also have terms of use for internal users who are accessing the eShare service, right? So you can put up a splash screen that just says, hey, you're accessing this tool and you're expected to use it in a responsible way.
Next question from William Curtis. If the attachment is stored on a local internal server, does the document have to be uploaded to a cloud server to be accessible to an external user? And the answer is actually yes, it does, but no, it doesn't have to be done by the user. So if you attach just a regular document, it doesn't matter where it's basically stored, local file system, local computer, NAS, whatever. The secure mail gateway will extract the attachment, put it in that sender's cloud storage provider, typically OneDrive, as we're talking about today, and automatically make that link into the cloud. If, again, you want to do the share from the desktop, and for example, you haven't migrated a lot of your infrastructure yet into the cloud, if you use our eShare client tool, you can simply right-click, create a trusted share, and the client tool will automatically push the content into the cloud in the background and then create the trusted share, so your user doesn't have to be bothered in terms of, hey, first you have to copy it into the cloud, and then you basically have to do the share. Next question, it says anonymous attendee, can policy be set by vendor implementation? For example, how Microsoft has implemented O365 for data flows, M365, GCC High, and GCC versus ITAR or CUI flowing to Microsoft O365 commercial. I believe this question is basically related to the external sharing capabilities and the challenges in sharing data with High and GCC and ITAR data around that in commercial. And so the answer is our sharing policies are sort of independent and outside the limitations that sort of exist today with GCC commercial and GCC High, because they essentially operate independently of the guest control mechanism that Microsoft has and their AD infrastructure that is shared for that to sort of normally work. And because it's under your custom domain and subdomain, you can easily share from any tenant to any tenant. There's no sort of limits in what you can share and how you can share. And of course, you're sharing securely with all of the additional sort of controls and policies that Bill sort of showed you into the system today. So I think I answered that. If I didn't, please ask it again. I'll give it a second shot. Another question from William Curtis: for business partners that are not eShare customers, how do they invite a collaboration with an eShare customer? Well, that's sort of the whole point, is when you enable eShare for external sharing, you are essentially collaborating, as I sort of mentioned a minute ago, with people outside of your tenant, and they do not have to be part of your tenant. They do not have to be the recipient doesn't even have to be in a Microsoft platform. They could be on-prem, they can be on G Suite, they could be whatever. It doesn't really matter what the recipient is. The only requirements for the recipient is an email address and a browser. And the pricing model that we have is very similar to email. We charge essentially for people that are sort of within an organization that send and receive emails or send and receive trusted shares. And there's no charge for anybody outside the organization that's the recipient of a trusted share. So that's sort of our model. And there's no difference in functionality or controls or visibility or anything like that between what you can do with internal users and external users. Now, of course, as Bill said, the focus essentially of eShare is mainly for external sharing. Internal users can continue operating natively within Teams and SharePoint and so on and so forth. And the external users will operate within the eShare platform.
I want to additionally add that external parties can initiate file sharing to your internal users through a feature we call Share With Me. And you'll see on this email signature line that Don has been using whenever he corresponds with someone. He's encouraging them to securely share files with me. And accessing this link will allow the external party to input their name and email address, and we'll send them a link to a private virtual data room that's dynamically created within, in this case, Don's OneDrive. So it allows the outside party to initiate file sharing, and it may be files that are too big for email, too sensitive for email, but allows the outside party to initiate that file sharing with Don using Don's OneDrive to accept and receive those files using the eShare service.
The other sort of nice thing, and since we're on this external recipients, is maybe just show them the guest functionality. We also have, as a side effect, we do try to make it as a holistic experience as possible for external recipients, and this is through our guest access functionality, where if we're going to show an example here with Humana. Bill's going to basically type the Humana custom domain, which is cloud.humana.com/guest. And now it's basically showing do author by Humana.
Okay.
If you have there's, you know what their URL
I
is?
don't know.
Oh, anyway, you get the idea. Here's all of the stuff that's been shared with that external recipient would appear essentially in one place. And so it's nice and easy to manage. So next question from Ahmed. Do any O365 conditional access tenant restrictions or external sharing policies need to be changed to use eShare? And that's a really simple, quick answer. It's no, absolutely not. You continue keeping your tenant locked down. You continue with whatever restrictions you have. You continue with any external restriction policies that you have, or any allow policies that you have. Even if you're doing today some level of guest access, and maybe you're doing it with sort of an allow list or an allow list at a domain level, allow list at a file level, we do not interfere with any of that. eShare is simply one additional capability for external sharing beyond what Microsoft provides, and you do not need to make any changes whatsoever to your tenant for eShare to do what it does. It actually leverages the Graph and OneDrive and SharePoint APIs to sort of do what we need to do. So you simply authorize eShare into your tenant, and we do what we do, and you make no changes to your existing tenant restrictions or sharing policies or conditional access control. So I think, and there's one more. Do you support brickftp.com or files.com as cloud-based file storage? Unfortunately not, we do not. We currently support obviously M365, which will include OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. We support Azure Blob Storage for Microsoft. We also support Google. We support Box. We support Dropbox. But that's currently we support. We can add others. We do sort of look at other potential cloud storage. But at this point, we just simply have to justify the investment based upon demand. And we just haven't had any sort of demand yet for those. Well, it's a combination of two things. One, there has to be demand. And two, those platforms have to have the appropriate APIs where we can potentially support them. Is that it for questions? I think that's it.
Appear to. I want to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, allowing us to brief you a little bit on eShare. For those whose email address I have, I'll send a recording of this session. I'll also send all the PowerPoint that we had used. If I don't have your email address for whatever reason, please send an email to bill@e-share.us. And I'll be sure to send those materials off. We, of course, would be happy to discuss any use cases of interest with our technical team and encourage any questions. So with that, we'll thank you for your time and wish you all a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.